Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here in Los Angeles, California, United States of America, April 9th, 2021. Been giving a series of talks over the last few months, primarily illuminating to my best ability the ongoing crisis in the country of Myanmar, Burma, where we have, for those of you who are just tuning in, we have a former military general and the armed forces that's turned into a terrorist organization, and they are decimating in their own way the people of Burma. People who want democracy, people who want freedom, people who want the respect for the sanctity of life. They've imprisoned my allies, my friends, my mentors, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, U Win Taint, the President U Win Myint, several thousands of others. There are hundreds, if not thousands of others that are moving throughout the country, so-called in hiding, to avoid as much as humanly possible the long arm of the terrorists stationed in the capital Naypyidaw. Many of you know that, but those of you who don't, that the internet is cut in Burma, which is just to empathize and to feel what it means to be without digital access. The internet is completely cut. Wi-Fi is cut, phone is cut, television and cable is cut, satellite dishes are criminal, they're outlawed. Satellite dishes connecting Burma to the outer world with information coming from the out in. It is now deemed a crime against the state, punishable by death. This is more than a firewall, this is a terror wall. If you have a satellite dish, take it down. They're confiscating them. There are soldiers and police forces going through the city streets and villages announcing to the population, take your satellite dish down or face the consequences, or they're taking it down. Stores are being closed. The country's going back to a blackout, a total blackout, as it was back in 88 and 89, a complete blackout. And under the cloak of darkness, we've already seen what the terrorist group will do in the full digital light of the world community. Okay, point two. I noticed that the Honorable Dr. Sasa, the representative of the parallel government now, I think he's in Washington or New York, speaking to so many different people in the media and leaders in different countries and committees around the world. He's now making it very clear that world community exercise the 2005 honorable clause within the United Nations Declaration of Principles, the right to protect a nation, a sovereign nation, from genocide, from ethnic cleansing, from assassinations, from essentially crimes against humanity, which if we were to have high pixelation of the meaning of crimes against humanity right now, we could not stomach even 5 seconds of what a terrorist organization, as being done in Burma today, are doing to people. They capture people alive and they come out dead, tortured, cut from neck to navel, bruised, beaten. It's purely unthinkable. So if we had visual testimony of these atrocities in the highest pixelation possible on evening news, morning news, afternoon news, at the United Nations, 50 to 100 square foot digital TV monitor that overlooks the sacred United Nations Security Council, 15 members, run by the presidential Chinese ambassador, representing the genocidal country of China, not the people, but the CCP. If we had high pixelation of these terrorist acts, It'd be a very different thing to sit there and be forced to visually and emotionally ingest the insanity, and then to try in your own religious, spiritual, political way to digest or to translate the insanity as somehow normal, and therefore make a decision to veto the sacred 2005 principle to protect innocent sovereign people from crimes against humanity. Now, if I were a position of leadership, which of course I am just who I am, I would actually make it mandatory that the 15 members of the United Nations and bring in all the 193 representatives and just simply ask them politely to ingest this psychedelic substance, to break through the firewall of your own normalization of insanity called apathy, fear, collusion with money, profit, and power, and to obliterate that defense wall, right? Here, Dr. Sasa is asking the world, telling the world, imploring the world to prevent genocide. And there is still this radical impotence, and it's like insanity made manifest on the world stage. And quite frankly, if I wasn't who I am today with the training that I have, it would be so disillusioning, so despicably off-putting to think that I would want to participate in the fabric of insanity called democracy in free countries, and to think that this is really the way in which we treat neighboring countries, friendly countries, sovereign nations, where in fact a terrorist organization formerly known as the Armed Forces has gone mad, satanic, to the point where they're torturing, brutally assassinating. And now they're outlawing, criminalizing any form of communication with themselves and the outside world. That is serious stuff. I think of blessed Burma, and I'm going to go on to the world here to talk about the world, not just on Burma alone. So please hang in, because this is a series of talks, the 9th in a row now, on my new book, Extinction X-Rated, which is in many ways talking about the normalization of insanity, the machinations of indoctrination, misinformation, socially, politically, spiritually, psychologically, and what you and I can do in my own dark gallows humor-based way. What does it mean to fight for your sanity and fight for your freedom and fight for your dignity and fight for the betterment of the lives of other people? That combination of engagement. And to me, at this point, it's so insane to look with any degree of mindful, awakened presence and look at the ineptitude, the tragic collusion of insanity with terrorism, and the normalization of that collusion as somehow democratic, the evolution of freedom. It is nothing other than the euphemism of freedom to enact evil perversion. And I'll tell you, in a global meltdown that we're in today with vaccine jab, jab, jab every 13 seconds with a new variant, and all of a sudden this thing called global totalitarianism, which is really high on my radar today. Global totalitarianism. For 35 years, unfortunately, I've been immersed in the study of totalitarianism, primarily in Burma, under a succession of dictators who were very nifty at mind control and manufacturing and engineering social, spiritual, biblical control, and persecuting through violence and through profit, 2 forms of torture: elevate, denigrate. Allure people through money, privilege, and power and sex, a typical Western way, but in Burma they use it very skillfully. Okay, the rest of us, the light walkers, the light weavers, we are unintimidated by the darkness that we see all around us. If there's anything that I can see, I'll get it right off my chest straight away. If there's anything that I can see in my life right now, I have been ignited. Now more than ever, to state the chorus of revolution, now more than ever. Cancel the cancel culture. Speak truth to the impotence and the insanity of great global, individual, national, biblical, spiritual, sexual maniacism. We have to study the machinations, to state the obvious but so easily overlooked, our collusion with insanity to propagate violence and denigration of soul, spirit, psychology, commerce, intimacy, the planet, and the death of the future of life and the death of the future of freedom. The world is at stake right now. It's a biblical, spiritual, epic, black and white, good and evil, totalitarianism and freedom. They want to put mind control in the genetic coding of our bodies. In other places, they want to put a bullet through your head if you speak the way that I'm speaking. Even if you think democratically, even if you think of freedom, they want to put a bullet through your head. They want to send a message of terror in Burma and around the world today. And I really do feel that the nuclear-powered genocidal sicko in China, I'm sorry to use such straight words, of Xi Jinping and those running dogs that decimated democracy in Hong Kong, and the ongoing persecution of the Chinese Muslims, the 3 million that are held in cages and organs being taken out and persecuted. And our former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, made it very clear to the world community, it is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. And then you look at the 75 years of what they've done and what they continue to do to decimate the Tibetans in their own sovereign nation, and how we have overlooked, not seen, or neglected the 200 men and women in Tibet who've lit themselves on fire without the benefit of media attention to send a message to the world community. We are immolating ourselves to let you know what we are undergoing in our own country. It's called genocide. Please, as Dr. Sasa is saying, as a representative of Burma, and Tibet, and the Uyghurs, and in Hong Kong, and in Los Angeles, and in Ubud, all over the world, the gentleman is stating, hey, there's a global genocide going on, unrestricted domination of people's lives, of their minds, of their biologies, and there's many different ways in which this war on freedom is going on, to state the obvious. There are a few people out there that are talking sane in relationship to the insanity. They want to conscript us into the university of self-subjugation. They want us to become slaves to our own fear, cower in our own self-generated corner of shame. Got to be very nifty on the psychological edge today and to really study the machinations of mind control. We don't need your education. Remember? Cute song, right? We don't need your mind control. A simple meme that should be running through the veins of all civilized life everywhere on this planet today. We don't need your mind control. We don't need the normalization of conformity. That's what's happening. And in Burma, it's so overt. Bang, 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 cut, 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 rape, 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 kill, 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 poison, poison, cut the electricity lines, cut the satellite dish, obliterate, bring it back into a North Korean-like cave-dwelling rock culture in a cave with Kim Jong-un and his psycho sickness, metastasized now, sorry to use the reference, metastasized into the idiot man in Naypyidaw, the terrorist Saddam Hussein known as Ming Online. Bad boy. Your wife should basically cut your balls off, dude, and put acid in your mouth and send you to China and work in a slave camp serving the Uyghurs until you pass on. How come that is questionable behavior when in fact genocide, ethnic cleansing, torture is normalized? Where in the are we today as a species that we can celebrate? Now, I wasn't a Game of Thrones like. President Obama and his wife Michelle loved season 8 of rape porn, Game of Thrones. Okay, cut my fucking throat off. But you celebrated absolute decimation of the feminine and the woman, thinking that it's artistic to be infidelity, as your argument was, all the producers of Game of Thrones. We want to stand in fidelity to how life was during medieval times. Therefore, we want to have men celebrating a woman who's taking it in the rear from a man who's grabbing her hair and has got a sword at her throat, and they're drinking and they're clapping and rah-rah Game of Throning it, man, because it's authentic. That is somehow acceptable with 58 million viewers. And what's going down, and Dr. Sasa at the United Nations is saying, in my own country, and oh, no. It's a sovereign nation. They should be able to do what they want to do. It is nothing other than Burma's Game of Thrones. Let them be authentic to their own perversity. There is something so sicko about all this thing. I wish I could be more articulate about this, but I've chosen to just simply be extemporaneous. Thank you for bearing with me. And let's join as force multipliers. Let's get our voices out there. Let's get our videos out there. Do your videos, do your podcasts, do your books, do your songs, do your theater, do your satire, do your comedy. Now more than ever, right? Rant on to the angel in the sky of your own repressed fear and give her every possibility to sing out loud from the mountaintop of your radiance the truth of your artistic, radical love of freedom. Confront the devil everywhere that you see it, him, or her. Call it by the pronoun appropriate to you. The fight is on. This is the big leagues. This is real life Game of Thrones. Just can't imagine, all the electricity goes down, the internet goes down, the cable goes down, everything's down. And I'm supposed to call that's really like, it's his problem. I mean, the LA Times today did a headline, Myanmar headed towards civil war of an unprecedented level. That's sort of like a mild version of what Dr. Sasa is saying. Burma is headed towards an ethnic cleansing where there is clear evidence of it having done before. No pride intended. 1990, I wrote a book, Burma, the Next Killing Fields, based upon what went down a few hundred miles away in Cambodia. And there was a big question mark put on it. The only person that listened to me, two, along with the publisher, was His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Jumped all over it. He knew what genocide was in his own country. He wrote a beloved foreword to the book. And the West Coast representative of Amnesty International, he got it. And we walked and talked and did everything we could to rise the radiance of activism in the beloved city of San Francisco, where I was living. We had 4 people come out to a talk on Burma, the Next Killing Fields. Oh, no. We don't mix politics with meditation and Dhamma. Blah, 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 blah. That is such an important phrase. Blah, blah, blah. It's blah, 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 blah. That's my message. Mindfulness is not enough. Dharma is not enough. The modernization, like for example, what do you want us to do in Burma? Take up weapons? They're taking up weapons. A civil war of unprecedented proportions? That's called a bloodbath of unprecedented proportions. And yet, the rest of the world at the same time, are you like fanning the flames of demonic prediction, Alan? Are you in kind of a semi-disguised, not really so disguised, moderate level of existential depression based upon 7 months of isolation and writing this incredibly intense, satirically dark, gallows humorous-driven, Extinction X-rated book? I mean, who are you? Where are you? Are you just like freelancing in your artistic creativity? No. Insanity is real. Burma is undergoing a bloodbath. There's tortures, there's murders, there's assassination, and the rest of the world is basically asleep at the wheel, just like David Suzuki made the comment years back. Human beings are in a car going headlong into a brick wall of self-annihilation called ecocide. Every human being is participating in what's been known as the homicidal economy, and we're arguing over where to sit, what we should chant, which breath you're watching in your mindful training. No, I want to do a yoga teacher training in the back seat of my automobile. Meanwhile, we're listening, Om Namah Shivaya Om, headed straight long towards extinction. No wonder we turn to the plant medicine. No wonder we tune into the psychedelic, literally, metaphorically, and molecularly. No wonder we turn away and run into the old hideouts of Kofangan and Koh Samui and Ubud and Canggu and Byron, formerly Byron. Now it's influenced out. Where are the new holdouts in this cosmos? Give me a wormhole into a new dimension. I want to know a God beyond God. I want to know a safety and a sacredness that isn't mixed in with the insanity and the turpitude of moral degenerate soul rot. I want to be away from those who do not know the secret things. I'm tired of participating as a warrior in a Romanesque Game of Thrones. Are you with me? Can we create a new reality that isn't part of this earth? Reboot, man. It's a bad design. And we're forced to participate in this aberrant set of atoms called activism and democracy. Well, welcome aboard. No. Burma is undergoing possibly a genocide, and the world is sick at the wheel, standing still and essentially basically saying, let China and Russia supply them with arms, let Singapore and other nations give them their loot, let them sell their oil and their gas, their rubies, their lumber, and their slave labor to manufacturers all over the world, including China and Japan, and in the EU, and let business run. We need the money. Hell with the blood and the torture. The normalization of insanity, and then the rest of us. How do you maintain sanity in a world that is totally insane, so vividly insane? What do? Just close off your ears, your eyes, your mouth? What about the issue of family? Let me close here. I don't know, you shouldn't be a leader unless you understand the role of responsibility, a love of freedom, a long, deep personal research with the psychedelic, and a deep obligation to family and compassion, and a willingness to act despite your addiction to profit, prestige, your skin color, whatever it is that prevents you from acting responsibly as a leader to family members on our global stage. Back in the monastery days at the Mahasi Center, when I was a monk, for the first about 18 months, I was pretty much in silence and meditation. I remember sitting at lunch one day, and all the food, of course, those of you who know, in Burma and monasteries are offered freely, known as dana. Very beautiful to be the recipient of people's unconditional gifts to not only survive, but to practice Dhamma, practice meditation in the sanctity of Yekta, the name for a monastery in Burma. And I was eating lunch mindfully, and there was a man in front of me, along with a lot of other lay people, which was common. And he was looking at me very much intimately in my eye, and I could see that he was crying, not weeping, but just crying a little bit. He was an older man. I was merely 29 at the time. He must have been in his 70s. And at the end of the meal, I broke silence and I said to him, "Sir, may I ask, in all due respect, why are you crying?" And he told me that he had gone to see my teacher, and my teacher had explained that I had been in the monastery for nearly 2 years. I'd come from America. I ordained as a monk, and I was here to practice the ancient teachings of mindfulness, Satipatthana Vipassana Bhavana. And he said to me, he said, "I was so awed that you as a young man found your way across continents, 10,000 miles away, and ordained as a monk, and now you've been in retreat for nearly 2 years. And here I am, the village head, and these are the people in my village. And this is the first time I've been to this monastery, but I'm making an offering on behalf of the entire village, because today I'm entering my first meditation retreat in my entire life. I'm the village head. I've had many responsibilities." And we sat in silence, and it was quite, for me, intimate, awe-inspiring, because I had gone into I don't want to denigrate myself here, but I'd gone into a period of, this is what I do. I'm a monk in a foreign monastery, and I meditate. It had gone from the power of Samvega and deep urgency and the passion of intimate self-exploration, which I came on fire. But now that I was somewhat immersed in the normalization of a day-to-day routine as a monk and a meditator, I was just sort of another day in the life of another day in the life of being mindful of Alan, being mindful of his mind, watching his thoughts come and go on the ocean, the ocean face of infinity, with feelings and thoughts, and just gliding along another day in the life of getting up at 3 and sitting and walking and mindfully eating and feeling and being. And this man is crying. I'm coming for the first time in my life. I've been so busy as a village head, and I'm awed that you are here practicing the way you are. So I caught fire based upon this man's grace and began to practice more intimately, paying more intimate attention. After all, I lived based upon the goodwill of people providing food and medicine. And days later, I'll cut right to the chase, days later I came down with a serious illness, a bacterial illness, and I'd had many of them, but this one was very debilitating, and it turned out that I had a very severe case of amoebic dysentery. I was on antibiotics, and then soon thereafter I got typhoid. And I took the antibiotics, but it was really debilitating and very painful. And then, oddly, I got hepatitis. And those of you who've ever had hepatitis know that it really takes you down. And I was on my back, and from 2 or 3 weeks before, where I was sitting and walking, being very attentive to my mind and my feelings and my thoughts, now I couldn't even move with the hepatitis that had gripped my biological intelligence and rendered me somewhat paralyzed. And then on top of it, they found a tumor that had to be removed, and it was removed, and it was not necessarily a very pleasant operation. And there was a massive infection, and I was on intravenous in my monastery room. And now all of a sudden, I was fighting for my life on intravenous with hepatitis. And the embassy were coming. "You're going to die here. Should we fly you back to America?" And I said, "No, this is my home." I could barely talk. But more to the point is that my teacher, the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw and Sayadaw U Pandita, sent and or invited Burmese lay people to care for me in my room in the monastery. And it was the first time in my life that I was rendered helpless on an ongoing basis, where I could not care for myself. Maybe you've been there or been around people. I could not care for myself without the good care of other people. It's very humbling to be taken to the washroom and to answer the call of nature, to be bathed by strangers. It's very unusual to not be able to feed yourself and to have someone wipe your lips with a cloth, a moist rag. And I remember those days so intimately, and these men and women would come in rotation around the clock and sit on the floor of my room and take care of me, and they would chant. They would chant Buddhist chants. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya damino upaticca va nirajanti te sambhupasamo sukho. Over and over, day after day. All things are impermanent. To understand this eternal principle of change and evanescence, of all things being in conditioned flux, is the highest form of happiness. Hold on to nothing and you will find peace. And to really live in the radiance of that reality, that everything is neurological, biological, ecological, existential, spiritual. We're in an infinite sea, to state the obvious, of photonic elements with neurons and blood and veins and organs and memories and conditions, where there is no real tangible inside and outside. From where we came and where we go, we do not know. But what we can see is that we're a constellation of conditions and conditionings in an infinite existential, ecological ecosystem of mind and physical properties embedded in context with these radical circumstances, from eroticism to genocide, that we encounter randomly or through choice. It's a crazy-making circumstances, and they were chanting these ancient Buddhist sanity-inducing chants as I heard them. And there I am, feeling that I might live or breathe or die another day, unable to move, being carried to the washroom and to be bathed and cleaned. It was pretty radical to go from being able to walk and talk and move and meditate to being utterly disabled. 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 8 months went by, and eventually I was nurtured back to life. And when I was healthy, I remember how happy I felt, relieved that I'd overcome the despair of illness. Obviously, many people cannot overcome that despair, can't overcome their illness. Obviously, we all are born to die. We're also born into circumstances not of our own making, where some live in the sanctity of peace and others live in the horror of violence. And we don't know where we're going to be, and we can't really trust that where we are is ultimately safe. Therefore, the notion of a global family, the United Nations of dignified members rooted in the sanctity of universal human rights, all beings born in conscience and in dignity, regardless of economic position, nationality, or gender. We think of the role of prime ministers and priests and popes and presidents, politicians, spiritual leaders, religious leaders, and we imbue those roles with honor, with dignity, with responsibility, with courage, to rise up into the purpose of your role, to help govern and to keep a civility, if you will, and a peace, and to honor the principles of the right to protect our members of our global family from genocide, from ethnic cleansing, from persecution, from crimes against humanity. I'm going right back to the obligation of leadership, active compassion, with courageous leadership, to not intervene on the sovereignty of another nation's internal affairs. You're not intervening when you stop a man from raping a woman. You're not intervening when you separate people, one whom is terrorizing someone and the child is running for her life. You're not intervening. You're doing the right thing. You're doing what's noble. You're doing what's ethically courageous. You're doing what is holy. You're protecting the sanctity of life. That's why you're a leader. And I'm thinking of Burma, right now, and what it must be like for the people of the country where the banks are closed, the civil disobedience movement has gained sufficient enough momentum where people are risking everything to cease participating in the machinery and the machinations of the industrialization of the military, the industrialization, the machinations of the terrorist group Mossack. They've stopped. They're interrupting the emotional, physical, and financial apparatus to keep the country running and to keep the terrorist group thriving. And the world community is doing what they can to also participate in the CDM movement. But the leaders around the world who really have their eye and hand on the heart of the people are saying it is not only terror now, but it's going to be an unprecedented civil war / genocide. Remember that the terrorist group has highly sophisticated Chinese and Russian-made jets, missiles, and weapons. The ethnic armed groups and the young civilian population of the country has conscience and a few weapons. It's a genocide in the making. And I'm wondering, the real insanity, yes, in Burma, but the real true insanity for me as a humble citizen outside in America and the world is the insanity and the perversity, and I would call it the political pornography of leaders, priests, popes, spiritual leaders, congresswomen, congressmen, the United Nations, the Security Council, call it what you will. Call it modern day uncivilized politics, but I would call it the pornography of political psychological terrorism. You're telling the people, we want to watch you like Game of Thrones. And we're going to do a press release that says, it's wrong, but hey honey, where's the wine? Just like President Obama and his wife Michelle. They may not sanctify rape porn in reality, but if it's on a screen, high five, baby. Burma's on a screen. It's perverse, it's sick, it's insane. And the world is the insane ones. The people of Burma are sane, except for the terrorist group. And I want to close here. I got better in Burma. I remember walking through the monastery, taking a time off from my intensive meditation. And I felt literally I was walking on water. I was so happy and buoyant and joyous. I'd never felt so youthful and alive to be back healthy again. How easy it is to take for granted our health, our mobility, our freedom of thought. Look in Burma, no satellite, no Wi-Fi, no Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, no internet, no social media, no news, journalists persecuted, shot, tortured, and in hiding, no hospitals, no dentists, no money. The people who are growing the food and normally selling the food are giving food to those who need it. Please come and take it. A culture of dana. The ethnicities, 135 ethnic groups, are uniting. We're seeing magic in civilization in Burma today. We're seeing a new world democracy from the ground up in Burma today. It's so inspiring, tragically, to see that it's taking this evil both in Burma and these gargantuan evil empires, Russia and China, with the collusion of the pornography of political ineptitude in the United Nations, in Australia, in Canada, the EU, and in America. The failure of leadership, the failure of respect for decency and the right to protect. I remember walking through the monastery up close here, and I heard from behind me a gentleman calling out my name, and those of you who have lived in monasteries know that they're generally silent, except for the automobiles bringing in food and supplies. And I heard my name and said, "U Agasara." And I went, I thought to myself, why is he calling out my name? I don't recognize the voice. And furthermore, some deep, arrogant place in me prioritized, I'm sort of in a hurry to get to where I want to go. I don't want to stop and address a foreign sound. But my conscience kicked in, my mindfulness rearose, and I stopped and turned around, but with a very subtle psychological hint of pride and who are you? What is it that you want? And please get to the point. Privilege, profit, power on a subtle level. Don't inconvenience me. The rest of the world about Burma, don't inconvenience us in our own protection, pursuit of money and profit and privilege and power, played out on a little level on a meditative ground in Burma. And he looked at me in the eyes and says, do you remember me? And I didn't remember him. And I said, I don't remember you. And he said to me, without a hint of arrogance, he said, I was one of the people that came to you in your room and helped support you when you were dying. I was one of the volunteers that came to your room and helped support you. He didn't say bathing and answering the call of nature and putting a moist cloth on my forehead and lips. I was one of the men who came to support you when you were dying. Isn't that the Dhamma? Isn't that human life? Isn't that our call to greatness? To help each other as family when we're dying? If we can't help each other when we're dying, what are we doing? Economic death, physical death, political death. Burma's undergoing, potentially, not a bloodbath, but a genocide, a national death by a terrorist organism called Masak. And I leave that image in the mind and the heart of all beings everywhere that may hear this. Obviously, leaders. What's required? This is why I wrote the book, Extinction X-Rated. What's required to call off the collective collusion with self-annihilation? And for 7 months, I sat in this room here with the psychedelic, with my heart, with a recorder, and really tried to process, what does it take to live in the world of insanity and madness today and not give up? And I don't know in Burma today, but the boys and girls obviously are compelled to take up weapons and join the good fight to confront the evil terrorist group. But before that goes on and there's a bloodbath, may I encourage a final time leaders around the world, the United Nations, intervene, no. Fulfill the conscience and the obligation of wise leadership and bring in peace-loving women and men, funds, medical supplies, money, and armaments. Show up in the seas around the country. Show up on the land in the country. Do everything humanly possible to embrace the 54 million people of Myanmar as family in their moment of need. What would it take? I know so many people that do plant medicine and psychedelic, medium, low, high doses, always trying to find deeper refinements to their psychological, emotional, spiritual dimension, which I admire. The people that need plant medicine and psychedelic assisted political, psychiatric, entheogenic psychiatry are world leaders. I wish there was a growing revolutionary meme that held our presidents and prime ministers, our popes, our politicians, include the pedophiles as well, the porno kings and queens as well. Make it, it's not original, make it absolutely so compelling to do and engage these timeless transformational sources of organic transpharmaceutical awakening to reinstate a psychological, political, spiritual decency that makes good on the promise of their religion, their holiness, their sanctity, their role as leaders. It's just thawing apathy, thawing greed, thawing, deconsolidating, depixelating this deep tenacity for inaction based upon what? The attachment to privilege, aesthetics, a warm bath, fine wine, intimacy. A country is undergoing a bloodbath. The leaders who have escaped are saying it's going to be a genocide. What does it take? What does it take? So from my heart to yours, let us keep rising up and reach out if you wish to communicate with me. I hope you have a chance to read my book, Extinction, X-Rated. And from my heart to yours, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.